Hello, and welcome to Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Today, I want to take a break from the hustle and bustle of the holidays and just focus on some art and something super cute. So I really want to paint baby penguins because have you seen how cute they are? They're fluffy and just like they're little balls of fluff with these black little heads, and I just really want to paint them. So today we're going to be painting baby penguins with watercolor. Specifically, I want to show how to make these little mini penguins that if you want to, you can turn into Christmas ornaments like I have. Here are the supplies I am using to do this. As always, there are some staples like our 2 glasses of water, something hard to tape our piece onto, some watercolor paper. I'm using this Strathmore Vision. It's my favorite of the Strathmores. I also prefer Canson. The main thing I look for when I'm choosing watercolor paper is the texture and that it's 140 pounds, so use what you like. You can do this tutorial to learn how to paint penguins without this part, but if you want to easily turn them into little ornaments, I recommend these double glass paned hanging frames. We'll need something to cut our paper to the size that we want it. I'm using one of these slide cutters, some masking tape to tape our paper down onto our hard surface, some watercolors. I will be using this dried pan set, and the colors I'm going to be using today are black, cerulean blue, ultramarine, crimson lake, and a teeny bit of yellow. A paper towel and some brushes. I am using a size 6 round brush and a mop brush. I don't typically draw out a lot of my watercolors that I'm going to do because it leaves harsh marks, but I would like to explain some of the kind of forms we're going to be using here that might help you when you are actually doing this watercolor. And if you want to sketch it, go ahead and do that, just do it lightly. The first thing I'm going to do is make a little circle that's going to be the bottom of his body. In general, this penguin is about 2 heights of the main circle, and it's kind of like an egg shape in general that goes up to that second height with a rounded off head that goes just above that double height. Then it's got 2 little wings that are just extra little kind of C shapes on the side. And the face is the inverse part of kind of a little M. So those are the basic shapes of this penguin that we're going to be drawing. The very first thing I did was I wanted mine to have a very light kind of teal background, that color that reflects on ice. And so I dipped my mop brush into water and then into the cerulean hue. And then I just picked up a little extra yellow that was already on my palette, and I mixed it up until I got that kind of teal color that I wanted. And I tested it, and I watered it down a whole bunch so that it was super, super light, and then I did a wet wash across the entire paper. I'm adding this background coat to do 2 things. One, because I want a slight color to my background, and the second is to saturate the paper with water. Most of what we're going to be doing today is going to be a wet on wet technique. So you want it to be wet. See how there's a bit of a shimmer? And you want to let that set and soak in until that shimmer is just about gone. You don't want it to be fully dry, but you do want the paper to be not soaking wet. So wait until that shimmer just disappears before moving on to the next step. This is a really good tutorial for you to develop better water control, which is one of the most difficult things to master in watercolor painting. So if you struggle with this at first and getting the right amount of wetness on your paper, that's okay. Just start again. While you're waiting for your water to dry, you can take your size 6 or a small round brush and mix up a very light gray color just with quite a bit of water and a tiny bit of black. Then we're going to take that brush filled with that gray mixture, and we're going to start by touching on the wet paper in kind of the bottom part of an egg shape. And at first, this is going to look kind of goofy. So if you mess up on this part, put your brush in the water, dry it off a bit, and let's actually move this around to make that kind of general egg shape that's going to make the body of our penguin. We are working wet on wet here, so a few things are going to happen. The paper that you wet first is going to slightly dry, but you are adding more moisture to it. So you want to work with what the paper is giving you. I went and dipped into a slightly darker mix of a gray color, and I'm touching that at the tops and the bottoms. I'm trying to build up a nice gradual variation so that this looks more round by concentrating color at the tops and the bottoms and the sides of this egg shape. And as I move along, I will even then add in some kind of gray area to define where I want those wings to be on the side. We're really only working with the black and water for this part of it, as well as removing parts of the pigment from the paper as necessary. But you're going to need to go back and forth between waiting for the paper to dry a little bit, not completely, and then using the pigment that you pick up in your brush and touching along those areas that you want to emphasize as being the rounded areas, so that we will slowly build up pigmentation in those areas. And then we will also remove and smooth some of that pigmentation using water and a drier brush from the middle part. If you're following along in real time, now might be a good time to watch this segment until I start with the next step of adding the feet and the head, and then pause until you get it looking about how you want it to. As you work on this, the paper on the outside that you pre-wet is going to dry more, but your body is going to stay wet. And once it is kind of nice and dry on the outsides, that's when you want to start adding in some of your darkest details. But you want to do that while the body is still wet so that it fades into it a little bit. So we're going to go straight into some black with a fairly dry brush. And we're going to touch just on the outside of the body, that area of the paper that is primarily dry, and we're going to touch up to the bottom of that rounded egg part, and that's going to make those kind of black feet. And you don't need to make these, like, draw out the lines for the feet. Just make a few little marks to kind of hint to them, because often their little penguin fluff kind of bulges out over them and obscures them most of the way, so you just need to hint at there being feet. The head part is going to be one of the more difficult parts of this, and this is where you want to make sure that that outside paper is dry, and even if your body is completely dry, that's fine. Start by making a little half circle that's a little elongated, and then make a little M that has a wide part in the middle, but does not go down and touch the very bottom line that you made that is slightly curved. And that's going to be the main part of the head. Drawing the little eyes as just little slant lines is going to just kind of make it be like a little cute, he's sleeping type of a penguin. That pigment is going to dry lighter. That's just typically a characteristic of watercolor, as well as since we're working on slightly wet paper, it's going to move around a bit. So I always go back in with a second coat as things dry a bit more and retouch on those areas that I want to be the darkest, which are going to be the feet and the head. So we're just going to do a really gentle coat of the black on top of where we already put that darkest pigment color. And I know this is a little out of focus. I didn't see that until I was editing, but we're just going over the same exact area as before. This does already kind of look like a little penguin, but I want to further kind of separate the wings from the body. So I'm going to go in with some of that darker pigment and actually kind of draw out that bottom U that will separate. And then I'm going to take some water on my clean brush and just touch along the sides and pull up some of that pigment onto the tips of those wings so that it actually will kind of differentiate the wings from the body of the penguin. I also like to use some clean water to retouch along the bottom of the head. so that it will slightly dissipate into the body. And you can do this as many times as you need to, further defining those black areas on the penguin and then softening it into the body. If the middle of your body becomes too dark, wash your brush off with some water and add that water to the center and kind of suck up some of that extra pigment so that the middle part, being more white, will look like it's sticking out more, like a little round fluffy penguin. Remember that if you are working on this and it's not going quite like you wanted it to, it's okay to try again. And it's also fine to take a pen or something once dry and outline those areas and just use what you have from the watercolor to kind of improve this with pen or something like that. I didn't do that in this tutorial, but if you are struggling, you can try to salvage it using a variety of techniques. Now is a good point for you to pause and finish adding your darker areas before we add on the hat, because we're going to want this to be pretty much dry. So there's my little penguin dude. He's a little funny. He's got his head kind of, his shoulders pushed up a bit, but I think he's pretty cute. For the hat, we're going to just kind of hint to that white fluff using some of that light gray and making little C shapes kind of along the edges of where that bottom part of the white fluff of the hat would be, and then off to one side around the location of just above the top part of that fluff hat. We're going to make a few C shapes in a bit of a circle, maintaining a lot of white space because it is white and we just want to use the white from the paper. Let this dry most of the way before moving on to the red hat. So in the meantime, I'm going to take some more of that teal color that I used earlier, and I'm going to touch that along the bottom to give him a bit of a shadow and a little more interest to place him in the scenery. I place it there, I wash my brush so that I have a little water in it, and then I kind of smooth that out a little bit and hint to it being textured snow. Once the fluffy part of the white hat is dry, I'm using a Crimson Lake color and mixing that with a bit of water so that we've got kind of a nice soft red color. And I'm going to form the hat. It's going to be a bit like a lumpy triangle with another triangle coming off of it. Fill those areas in with that red color, being careful not to go into the fluffy part, and you want this to soak in just a bit before you add in maybe a few hints of shadows for the folds of the hat. So I'm going to grab a tiny bit of ultramarine and mix that into some of that Crimson Lake so I get kind of a nice deep burgundy purple color. And I'm going to touch that just along the edges where that hat folds over. And that is our little penguin. So I want to do a few things before I take him off, which is I want to highlight a little bit more red, and then I'd like to put a little 2020 at the bottom of this so that I can put it in my ornaments and it will kind of show me what year it was. Here is our little dude, and before I take off that tape, I'm actually going to keep that on to help make a guiding bottom line for my text. So wait for this to dry before moving on. Once dry, we can use a black pen. I personally really like using these Papermate felt tip pens. I think they have just really good pigmentation and they're really easy to draw with. The only problem is that they are not waterproof, so you need to do this on completely dry paper. Otherwise it's going to run and kind of ruin what you've created. I like to pre-mark with little dots where I'm going to put each of my characters so that I just have a guide of where to put them and I'm not ending up with it all pushed over to one side where I didn't want it. Then I just wrote 2020 in as nice of handwriting as I could manage. This is not usually my forte. One little trick I do have for making your handwritten numbers or letters look nice is to write them out first as you would, and then on any area where you usually have a downstroke on at least one side of the letters, I add in a second line and I'll color that in. And I always like mine to be on the same sides when I'm doing this hand lettering. You can mix yours up and actually follow the down strokes and the up strokes, but sometimes varying the weight of those lines and adding in a few details like dots will help it look a little more finished. So that's where I'm going to leave mine. Remember to always use a hair dryer to remove the tape. It actually releases the adhesive and then you won't rip your beautiful painting. With the tape off, you can finally see a little bit of that blue tint that we added to the background. I always love seeing what they look like when I remove the tape. Then I just put it in my little frame. I just think these little frames are so cute. And then I went and hung it on my tree. Thank you for watching. I hope you had as much fun painting penguins as I did, or, well, at the very least, browsing fluffy penguin pictures. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below and I will answer them to the best of my abilities. If you'd like to see some of my other paintings, you can follow me on Instagram at Lacey Walker Art or at Rebel Unicorn Crafts. And I hope that you have a magically creative day.